Hello, friends. Welcome back to Ketamine Connections. I am your host, Anna Krishtal. I'm so excited to share with you this episode today. This was such a great conversation. I had the pleasure of speaking with Jamie Dirks. He is a psychiatric nurse practitioner and the co-owner of Thrive Health Consultants based in Loveland, Colorado. Jamie has been in the mental health field for over 20 years, starting in critical care and nursing, and now focusing on psychiatric care with a special emphasis on ketamine-assisted therapy. Jamie is so deeply passionate about holistic health, including nutrition and integrative care, and brings a real wealth of experience in trauma-informed care that really came through in this episode, and I'm so excited for you to hear it, because in our conversation, Jamie shared some of the most powerful insights into psychedelic assisted therapy, particularly with ketamine, and how it is helping people with trauma, anxiety, mental health struggles that have been resistant to traditional treatments, but are now finding so much relief. One thing that really stood out in this conversation was this message that Jamie got to slow down. It's intentional that this episode is coming out in the month of December, where everything feels like it's sped up. Jamie even said in this episode how this message to slow down is something that he received years ago and is still integrating into his own life, even years after this message was downloaded during a retreat. And, this idea of slowing down, it ties into the long game of integration. Jamie emphasized how the work does not stop once the psychedelic session is over. And that is the message I want shouted from the rooftops of what psychedelics do, is that they make so much possible, and it goes so much beyond the psychedelic medicine itself, so much beyond when that session is over. It is really during the integration phase that the real transformation happens. It's not a quick fix, but it is a long, potentially slow, but who cares? The time is going to pass anyway. It's a process of learning to bring the insights gained from the ceremony, from what you experienced, into everyday life. And it's such an important reminder for all of us. It's something that Jamie continues to embody and practice as he helps others. And it is such a divine, true delight to talk to someone who is walking their talk. Our conversation that you're about to hear, oh gosh, it really underscores how psychedelics, when used responsibly, can offer profound healing, but it's the work after the experience that truly shapes the lasting change. And, Jamie's commitment to slowing down and allowing time for integration has been key for him. It's been key for his clients. And honestly, it's a message that I think we all need to hear more often. Healing takes time, and that is okay. I cannot tell you enough what a pleasure, delight, and honor it has been to have Jamie on the show. And I hope you walk away from this episode with some fresh insights about the role of ketamine therapy in healing and the vital importance of integration. If you are someone who is interested in psychedelic therapy, especially in relation to long-term trauma or mental health recovery, this episode is so insightful for you. As always, any questions you have or anything that you want to dive deeper into integration work or ketamine therapy, please reach out. And another reminder that the Subliminal Workshop is happening January 29th, and the lowest offer on that ends on January 1st. So that is the lowest offer that you'll see. All of that is in the show notes. And get in there. Come get a personalized subliminal recording for your goals for 2025, and I'll see you there. It is amazing. And in all that pre-recording, I didn't actually ask how to say your name. Is it Jamie Dirks?
It's Jamie Dirks, yes, thank you. And you're Anna, not Anna. Anna.
It's both, but yeah, let's go with Anna.
Well, today. Yeah, mine's name's spelled with two I's, and it's been misspelled since I was born, so I don't get too concerned about that either.
Yeah.
Yeah. good.
Yeah, I speak multiple languages, so sometimes it's Anna and sometimes it's Anna, and I genuinely don't have a preference.
Right. Sometimes I hear Jaime, and now I understand why. Because when I lived in Texas, my friend said that's the way they spell Jaime in Spain is with 2 eyes, but with 1 eye, that's a Mexico thing or Portuguese or somewhere else, Argentina maybe.
What's in a name, huh?
Right. Thank you, Shakespeare, once again. He was just here, and now he's here again.
Incredible. Okay, so Jamie, every interview that I host on the podcast, thank you for being here today on the Ketamine Connections podcast, starts with the same question. If you could go back and tell you before you started all this anything, what would it be?
And that was interesting because when I saw that question, I'm like, okay, I'm going to be thinking about this question forever. I expected to be thinking about it forever, but immediately 2 words came to mind: slow down. Now, those words were offered to me by a dear therapist friend of mine that I did a training with, Tom McCabe. Shout out to Tom McCabe. We were having a wonderful conversation. He leans over to me. He goes, slow down. I go, yeah, I know. I talk fast. And he goes, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm like, it was epiphany freight train right there moment. That was my 3rd ketamine experience in total. No, that's not right. 5th. I had 4 at home, 1 with this, 2 with these training exercises. Either way, this is the 5th time I'd ever had ketamine in my entire life, probably within a 2 or 3 month framework, and everything just opened up because those 2 words meant everything to me. It just put everything into place. And I'm still integrating that 2 years later. Those 2 words, slow down. I'm like, you mean everything? Oh, wow. Okay, great. And then what ketamine offered me was, hey, you don't have to be disappointed in your previous behavior. You can learn from that, continue to live that mantra, if you will, and understand what that feels like. And then, and then it just, well, if you will, mushroom from there into just it's still working on it for sure. Like I said, still integrating it. I will probably be integrating this for the rest of my life, those 2 words from my friend Tom McCabe. But it's meant the world to me so far.
Ooh, there's at least 1,000 ways we can take this conversation from what you just said. Let's start with, what did it mean to you to have that mind-blown moment by the 2 words, slow down?
I suppose if I were to overanalyze it, now being a psychiatric nurse practitioner and then previously and been a nurse for 25 years, I probably would have just analyzed it till the day is long and would have maybe not missed the meaning, but maybe not fully grasped the meaning then or now. What it means is that, okay, everything can slow down. The way I approach a problem, the way I respond, instead of responding to things, now I just act on things. I don't react nearly as much as I used to. So, I know ketamine helps a lot of things for a lot of folks. Depression is a big one. I don't want to say I don't get depressed, because sure I do, but I'm not clinically, I don't have major depressive disorder. I don't meet criteria for it, but I sure as hell have generalized anxiety disorder. There's no doubt about it. So for anger management, just not worrying about everything all the time. I had one patient put it really succinctly to me. He goes, I used to worry about everything, but now I'm just concerned about a lot of things, but I don't worry about stuff anymore. I'm like, oh, interesting. So in the spirit of yet another shout out to another dear therapist friend who was at the same training, actually, Tony Rooney. Tony's a dear friend. Tony's a psychologist, clinical psychologist. He looked at me and he goes, words matter. And I go, yeah, I know, you hurt other people and stuff like that. You say things, and he goes, it's not just to other people. And I'm like, another mind. So this 3-day training was like 20 years of therapy. Just epiphany moment after epiphany moment. So when we talk about integration later, that's what I think really, really sold me, if you will, on the power of any of these medicines, but the framework with which you are receiving said medicine is that how you integrate it is something that you really need to pay a lot of attention to, because things come up, things that you're not expecting, things that you're like, oh, pay attention to me. You don't have to run over and give me a hug right now. Mr. Big Anxiety Monster, but you can at least turn to me and face me and say, it's okay. Maybe I can be thankful for you someday.
I think so. I think there's a lot of gratitude on this path.
Yeah.
It's interesting because, my background is hypnotherapy. So I know a lot about these diagnoses, depression, anxiety, PTSD, all of these disorders. Right. But because of my background with hypnosis, I get to talk about them really differently. And so the way that I talk about these states is that they're very dense states. They're very, I talk about it like bowling. It's like that ball is in the gutter. How do you get it back in the lane type of speaking? And when I hear you talking about slow down, especially when you're talking about anger, anxiety, what I hear is that's where the personal power is, right? You have the impulse, you have the response. The space in between in a lot of these states is been erased, right? Impulse, response, impulse, response, impulse, response, impulse, response. You slow down, you get your personal power back of oh, this person said something. I can react the way that I have my whole life or the past, 2 to 20 years, or I can slow down, make that, right? Turn, get that ball out of the gutter and make a different choice. And the ripple effects of that are incredible.
Yeah. And if you have good support, whether it's your own mindfulness practice or your, groups that you work through processes with, other sort of individual support, loved ones, pets, things like that, then you have the support so you can, when these, in your bowling metaphor, whether the ball's in the gutter or whether the strikes all but one pin, now you got pins everywhere. You're like, okay, what do I do with pins everywhere? Okay, well, slow down a little bit, maybe carve a little bit of this out, maybe just, maybe ask for some help with this pin over in this corner, because maybe that's a pin that you've had a lot of difficulty standing back up. So that can maybe be like, hey, can you help me with X, Y, Z? Great. Farm out some of the work. That's why you have friends and loved ones, because you're going to do stuff for them. So it's a, you can kind of, I don't want to say get lost on your healing path, but sometimes it can be potentially overwhelming, where you have, said, either ball in the gutter, same default sort of track, or ball is heading right for the pins and all of a sudden there it goes in the gutter at the last minute. So there's a lot of different applications in that metaphor, but it gets you to a similar place where you're, okay, what's next? Oh crap, I need help with this. Oh, I need to ask for help with that. So that, and like you said, that can, a shout out to another therapist friend who I just did a retreat with, Greg. He talks about gaining agency with things, power and agency. Agency to me means if you have some agency with stuff, that means you have, not necessarily that you have to have control over it, but that you have the ability to understand it when it shows up. Whether that's a suicidal thought, whether that's the desire to go get the cocaine out of the bathroom and do another line, whether that's, spend another $900 on Amazon. There's a lot of those sort of tendencies. And then circling back to my friend Tony, when words matter, you're saying those things to yourself too. Now your brain responds to those like, ooh, there's that gutter ball that a lot of people feel stuck in. And a lot of things haven't allowed them to feel unstuck, whether it's suicidal stuckness, depression stuckness, anxiety stuckness, trauma response that goes to the similar, if not the same place every single time. Maybe your trauma response is, I'm just going to throw things and break stuff, or I'm going to go get in my car, drive really fast. So it's sure you can recognize them, but what do you do when you recognize them? Can you have enough agency in your own work to know how to process it at the time? And that means it's okay to send it out to others. But can you recognize it when it's there, rather than, like you said, just reacting to it, thereby giving the same energy back?
Absolutely. And I like what we were talking about this before we hit record about word nerd and words mattering. And that's my background in hypnosis is really where I really understood that. And there's a saying, our words create our world. right? And so it's
Mm-hmm.
these words are, we can only explain things we have language for. And so really getting your mind wrapped around that. And the mind is a place where everything is created. And one of my favorite quotes that I live and work by is, the quality of your life depends on the quality of your questions. So if that ball's in the gutter, or it's about to hit the strike and it goes in the gutter last minute, what do you say to yourself in that moment? Do you say, oh, why do I always mess this up? Why does this always
Mm-hmm.
happen to me? Why can't I get it right? Or do you say, okay, how do I get it? How do I do it a little bit better next time? How do I do it a little bit different? Okay, I almost got there. Or, okay, I could see it differently. And it is that, right? It's that slow down that can get us to say, okay, I didn't quite get it on that round, but I did a little bit better than the round before. And that's the integration piece, right? The integration
Mm-hmm.
piece, making those epiphanies, those states, to bring them into the wholeness of the being.
Right. Which is what, word nerd, shout out to the word nerds, integration means that, you said it in one of your earlier episodes. It means to make whole, bring things together. And how many pieces does that take? We don't know. What are the size of the pieces? We don't know that either. And my friend Tony, who said words matter, he goes, in that same sort of vein, he's like, when he goes, I have clients who say they beat themselves up. Man, when I do this, I get down on myself. I beat myself up. And he goes, okay, let's pause for a second. He goes, do you actually beat yourself up? Because some people do. That's a physical sort of battery as a response, for sure, defense mechanism. And they go, no, don't do that. And he goes, could it be that you're just being unkind to yourself? And they're like, so when you reframe it, and whether you reframe it yourself or allow someone else to help you reframe it, the difference between the word try and aim can be one of the biggest things ever. Because, lots of folks have pointed this out. You included, I think. If you say try, I'm going to try to do this, your subconscious has pretty much already said, I'm not doing it. It's just like, yeah, I might, but a pretty good chance I ain't going to do it. If you say, I'm going to aim to get this done by the end of the week, you're probably going to have a hell of a lot more succinct chance of completing that task rather than like, I'm going to try. I'm like, yeah. So it's tough. And so when you start saying those words a little differently, now your brain hears them and it creates new pathways and the integration of new pathways and making new neurons. And now you're not stuck in the gutter as much as you used to be. And you're like, oh, I can lift myself out of said gutter and I can look around and now I can participate in some of the things that I think might be helpful for me without feeling so bad about my previous self. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just having a conversation with a 10-year-old literally today. We were talking about practicing. And I said, practicing is just doing the same thing over and over. And it kind of blew her mind. She's like, well, practicing is just doing the same thing over and over until you get better at it, with the intention of getting a little bit better every time.
And when you're 10 and concrete thought is just starting to solidify a little bit, you're like, oh, over and over. Yeah, same thing. Okay, you might do a little something different each time. But I'm a guitar player. When I'm practicing, I play the same 4 or 5 songs that I know I need to work on the most. If I have 30 or 40 that we're playing, I need to work on 3 and make sure I don't miss that part. I'll play the other ones, but some of the other ones are fairly straightforward. These are the ones I practice. So every single time till my fingers just remember where to go. Same thing with behavioral responses. Same thing when you do hypnotherapy. There's a lot more to it than just saying the same thing over and over. It's a somatic sort of landing of those feelings. It's a historical, recognition of what those things feel like. You're like, wow, okay, now I know what it feels like to not have so much weight on my chest or not throw up every time I get stressed out, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. One of the things that I would love to normalize in the psychedelic space is integrating something for your whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk more about, you said in the beginning, your friend said slow down, and you're still integrating that 2 years later, right? And you even said you'll probably be integrating it forever. There's messages that I've gotten from psychedelics and also from my yoga practice, or just, my own meditation practice, where I'm like, oh, wow, I'm going to be integrating this for my whole life. This is a part of my lifelong journey of learning. And so what does that mean to you?
Good question. And that was kind of part of how I was formulating my response to your first question about if you could tell the you before you started this journey, what would you tell them? And a specific thing. slow down is kind of a big global thing, but the other thing was it was going to be yoga is your friend, because I've known that for a long time. My wife introduced me to it 20 years ago. Her best friend from kindergarten's a yoga teacher, has been for 30 years. Another one of her dear friends is a yoga teacher. Once I finally realized, but I didn't realize that it was that good for me until probably about 3 years ago. So over the last 3 years, it's been kind of an on-off relationship. I'm like, before this healing journey and the whole setting things, slowing them down. And the other part would be like, yoga really is your friend, because like you said, I've tried to help patients with this too. I'm like, there are not too many exercises that I can think of that are really, really meditative while you're engaging in said exercise. Whatever meditation means to you. I'm not saying that people who are out running aren't getting good meditative quality out of their experience, but I see folks when they're doing Qigong or Tai Chi or swimming, yoga, they're just, and like, so and yoga in particular, that one, so you get the stretching and the strengthening, but it's the physiological, because you mentioned particle physics in one of your previous episodes. But I nerd out on. If I nerd out on stuff, it's particle physics. I really like that. And looking at things on a cellular level, what happens when you take good yoga breaths every time you're on the mat? You're taking good breaths. You are exchanging gas, which means you are getting rid of more carbon dioxide than you usually are. Because what do we do when we're stressed out? We hunch our shoulders up, we clench our jaw, and we don't breathe. Every yoga breath encourages you to get that carbon dioxide out. And what happens when you have carbon dioxide accumulate in your bloodstream? Your blood becomes a little more acidic. Not enough to kill you before sundown, but enough to make you feel like crap. Maybe your guts don't work as well. Maybe your neurotransmitters aren't as efficient. That little bit of and that can be in that pause and that slow down we talked about. That can be 1 second at a red light before you're starting to lose your proverbial shit. Pardon my French.
You're good.
I figure I'm going to be real. There's no reason to be inorganic about the conversation. But if you're stressed out all day long and you're not exercising those bottom parts of your lungs and you're retaining carbon dioxide just a little bit all day long, guess what? Depression and anxiety, trauma responses, lots of stuff, gut imbalances, allergies, chronic pain. Can that all be solved by good yoga breaths all day long? Probably not. But nothing's rarely solved with one thing anyway. But that's one way that can kind of introduce folks to a couple things at once. A good yoga practice and a mindfulness breathing type of practice, however that means to you, which kind of piggybacks on the part of what is going to be there for me that I'm going to be continuing to integrate for the rest of my life. A number of things, but particularly grounding. That has been a huge, huge concept for me to really become comfortable with. I'm wearing a grounding strap right now, actually. My wife got this for me. I wear it. I think grounding with your bare feet on the earth is fantastic, but if you can't do that as often as you would like to be able to do so, and I see psychiatric patients for 12 hours a day, 3 days a week, sometimes you need a little grounding in real time, and that's great, because then I can be there for them without, oh God, they just told me some of the scariest stuff I've ever heard. What do I do with that? Okay, I can't hold that in. I have to let that go. Placebo, I don't care. It really has gotten me in tune with what grounding really means. And that has really solidified that whole slow down stuff. And it really makes it it has grounded the slowing down concept for me, essentially. Not just this, but grounding in general has done exactly what it was intended to do.
Yeah, it takes the energy, right, from up here. It took me so long. I think I was practicing yoga for like 15 years before I understood what grounding was, and teaching it for many years. And I was like, oh, because one of the primary principles of yoga, of the asana practice, is root to rise, right? And it took me a while to, I think it was in like 2019, 2020, when I started spending more time outside barefoot, where I thought, oh, the grounding thing really, really clicked in. But I like what you're saying about the placebo effect, because the placebo effect is one of my favorite things to study, because it's highly effective.
Totally legit. 100% legit. Not 100%. That can be cut out later. Just kidding. Placebo effect is very valuable and incredibly spontaneous healing. I don't know if you ever heard that book, Andrew Weil. Yeah, there's another one, Lissa Rankin. I don't know if you heard of her. She's another great author who writes a lot about spontaneous healing and spontaneous remission of cancer and things like that. She's a OBGYN doc who got out of that and has kind of been called to just hold space for people who are healing on their own without conventional types of approaches. So yeah, spontaneous remission, spontaneous healing, fantastically legitimate.
So it's fascinating to me because I know on a scientific, neurological, 3D level, I know the power of psychedelics. I know the benefits that they have. I know the tangible, demonstrated change that they inspire. And just from being in this field for so many years, I also see how psychedelics become a little bit of a permission slip, right? Someone goes on a journey and they do something they've never done, whether they stay at home and in this country and work with ketamine, or they go abroad and they work with a different medicine, or anything in between. It's, I don't see people go on that journey and say, okay, I'm just going to stay the way that I am, right? They're going out of their comfort zone. It's this subconscious permission slip of like, I'm going to make a big change. I'm going to do something crazy because I just did something crazy. It's called a psychedelic. And so I'm not going to come back the same way that I went. And that was one of the things that we were talking about before we hit record also, is how integration deters. It doesn't always, but it kind of is the insurance policy on going back to the medicine over and over again and spiritually bypassing the lesson that's there. So I would love for you to speak to that.
Yeah, it's it's a great discussion because everyone's healing journey is different. Everyone's things come up differently. But one of the first lessons that I was taught from some of my teachers is normalize, if you can, try to normalize taking breaks from whatever psychedelic medicine you are utilizing for your healing pathway. And then that really flows into the really stressing the integrative part of what you're trying to accomplish. Like you said, if you're going to take off to Equatorial Africa for an iboga ceremony because you can't kick your heroin habit, yeah, there's a lot of edginess there. Hey, but like you said, you're not just going nonchalantly, hopefully. You're like, I'm spending a lot of money on this. I've got to travel 12, 15 hours from Atlanta or something just to get there. And it's illegal where I live. And so folks are like, okay, so they push past the stigmatized part and the scary part of like, I'm going to do an illegal, I'm going to go to Arkansas and do an ayahuasca ceremony because I can't stop doing alcohol every day, but it's illegal, but they're going to do it anyway because they want to free themselves of whatever strife and difficulty they've amassed at that point. So they'll learn things, whether it's a psilocybin ceremony, whether it's a sound bath, no medicine type of thing in the woods in Tennessee that can all be wonderfully transformed. Cannabis, breath work, a lot of stuff. Folks will learn things and like, I feel better. I'm more motivated. Cool. Let's go. Hey, what are you doing next weekend? You want to go to a mushroom ceremony? Okay, cool. Let's go. Like, okay, you go to one of those. And so the ceremony hopping kind of thing, if you will, it's a thing. And that's okay. Like I said, everyone's healing journey is different. That's not the way I received ketamine, for example, as my catalyst for my healing experience. I received it in a really well-intentioned container with good boundaries and wonderful integration afterwards. And I had probably some of my more profound moments after about my fourth or fifth session. And after that, it was maybe I did a couple more and some training exercises. And then after the 10th one, I'm like, okay, I think I'm done. People go, how did you know you were done? I go, the medicine told me. It just did. I mean, and I have another friend. He's a therapist. Bless all of my therapy friends' hearts, because after I became a psychiatry specialist, I'm like, yeah, okay. I haven't been doing exactly what you all been doing, but as a nurse for 23 years at this point, I've been holding a lot of sacred space for folks and really kind of okay, what do I learn from myself in holding said sacred space? So you learn a lot about yourself in those things and what's safe for folks. But yeah, bypassing the spiritual part of it's tough because whatever spiritual background or religious type of construct or whatever, my friend Patrick said, God's a personal thing. If people kept it that way, it might be a lot less issue in the world. Either way, but whatever that means to you, what's coming up in these ceremonies, what are you learning from it? Because if you're not integrating it, essentially what you're doing is, amongst other things, but putting a big defense mechanism in place of not learning not integrating what you're learning, and just kind of hopping off to another ceremony. You're like, oh, I heard ayahuasca is interesting. Oh yeah, let me go try that. Oh yeah, somebody's got some San Pedro. I heard that's kind of cool too, but it can't do peyote, right? Yeah, you shouldn't do that. So it's kind of like, I want to try the next one. I'm like, that's good. My friend's got a liter of acid. Let's try it. I'm like, hold on a second. Not just that you should start with ketamine, because I don't think anybody should do anything that they're not called to. I think that's really important. But you mentioned in one of your other episodes too, and a lot of my teachers have shown, and this has been my own experience, is that ketamine is a wonderful, sometimes introduction to other psychedelic type of medicines, but sometimes that's what people need or want. We've worked with one client. She's had 2 ketamine sessions. That's it. After the very first one, she said, is this what happiness is supposed to feel like? And she said that in the midst of the ketamine experience and then repeated it. And she didn't remember saying it, but she subsequently finished her master's degree, has a better relationship with her husband. Sometimes it's a one and done for folks. Sometimes it's every month. So the intervals can look different, but the medicine itself is a wonderful, sometimes not just entry point, like I said, sometimes it is the medicine for folks. And for me, it has been the medicine. So, but a lot of that said comes with not bypassing the sacred stuff that you get put in front of you. Like for me, it was connection to everything, because in the particle physics world, I've always wanted to believe that everything is connected, because I kind of understood it that way. But with the ketamine session, I saw it. I could see it connected. Fabric of the universe kind of stuff. But then I realized, oh, I am connected to this teacup. I am connected to you through ones and zeros through our talk today. Everything is connected. Waves, and Dick Schwartz talks about waves and particles and no bad parts. You can either be a particle right there kind of sitting around, you can be the particle in a wave form, and there's your go with the flow type of, application and all those other kind of things. So yeah, back to the spiritual bypass, I think it's important for folks to, not ceremony hop, but ask yourself why it is that you're doing that. What is it that you're maybe avoiding in not integrating your powerful, mescaline experience, for example. So that's where a lot of work that we do with harm reduction and integration, and really kind of, just offering as much advice for folks. In the wife's a professional nurse coach, I'm a psych NP. I can offer medical advice too, because I'm a family NP. So we come at it from a fairly large lens, but look at it as what are you doing for yourself in these moments? What are you doing with what you've learned? No, I don't think you can have another ketamine session tomorrow because your mind is not in the right place. I'm not just going to give you a ketamine session because you feel like you want one. It doesn't happen that way. And furthermore, let's talk about why you feel like you need to have one right now. That's what we're going to do, is we're going to talk about it. We're not going to just give you a shot. So yeah, safety first, man.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. It reminds me of, I love the integration piece, and I think my heart really is with the preparation piece, because what I really love about the preparation piece is saying to people, hey, your life is about to change. Let's talk about it. And getting them into that mindset, right? Psychedelics 101, set and setting. With ketamine, that's what I love about ketamine, is the setting is good. The setting is safe. It's sound, as long as you're doing it legally. With the mindset, right? Like, hey, your mind is about to experience something different. Your whole world can change. Let's talk about that, because I talk to a lot of people and I say, why are you doing this? Why are you here? Why are you doing ketamine? And they say, well, I want to be happy. And I say, great. Well, how do you know when you're happy?
Right.
How do you know you're not happy right now?
Right. Yeah. No, I think the preparation is huge. And integration starts with preparation too. Several people have said that. It's incredibly poignant. And that's what, I don't want to pick on any of the generic mail order ketamine models, but we operate small. We do 1 or 2 patients at a time, and very individualized, very personalized, and thorough psychiatric background with everybody, thorough medical background. Like, okay, you don't. I tell folks, I go, hey, I can hold space for you. You do not need to tell me everything horribly traumatic that happened to you as a child or as a young adult or yesterday. But if there are traumatic things that may come up and inform your experience, I want you to be prepared for that, and to be prepared for maybe needing some support, whatever that is, whether it's your own support, whether it's my support, whether it's your dog's, something to support you when when you almost hit a strike, but it's like, oh crap, 7-10 split. Okay, well, there's a lot of pins on the ground. I got a lot of stuff to sift through. Okay, what do I do? Well, I don't do ketamine the next day, for example. Now, it slightly changes if you're acutely suicidal. There's some research and decent research out there showing acutely suicidal folks maybe 1 or 2 days in a row, maybe sometimes 3 in a row, to kind of maybe break and interrupt that suicidal ideation cycle at that point. And then you can work further from there potentially. So I also really try to dig into that part of people's aspect, because if you're acutely suicidal, maybe once a week with ketamine and your therapist, that might unravel just a little too much for you. So let's make sure you have the right amount of support, or the right kind of support, if as is likely going to happen if stuff unravels. Or as my friend Tom says, the disassembly process is pretty powerful with ketamine, he says. I'm like, it really is. He goes, the reassembly is beautiful, but the disassembly, especially with intramuscular ketamine, he goes, that is a pretty powerful force.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I love what you were saying about, the connection piece, because we know on a neurological, brain science, just like chemical level, our brain is, I think about it like a little fun house, it's like all of these neural networks are different rooms, and then the psychedelics come in and they lower the walls, and now you have your neural network of, pain, trauma, dense, whatever density, talking to the neural network of joy and peace and happiness, and they're having a conversation, and your experience is like, it's not so bad. It's okay.
I've done this forever. I can do this again. Yeah, whatever. I've done this for 40 plus years. I can do this again,
Exactly.
Maybe.
It's incredible. But then also adding in the preparation work, preparing for that unraveling, right? Like I talk about my work in this way, my wheelhouse, I love, because I have a history of a lot of dense anxious states. I have a lot of anxiety in my past. And so I really resonate with people who are anxious. Those are the people that, they're like, oh, ketamine doesn't really work on the anxious folks. And it's like, well, it does if you have someone that knows anxiety and can explain it to them, then it does. And that's the thing. Our society doesn't really understand anxiety. They're just like, just don't worry. It's like, it's a little bit more complicated than that.
Yeah.
But with the, what I talk about in my work is, I take people that are prone to anxiety, who need to know what's going to happen who think they need to know what's going to happen to sort of downplay and squash the anxiety. And I prepare them for a situation in which there's no way to know what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
You go into psychedelics, you don't know. You have no clue.
Whatever comes up, comes up.
Yeah, you get the trip that you need, not the one that you want. You want to feel happy? Well, here's what's standing in the way of your happiness, my friend. Like, get this out of the way, and there's your happiness.
Right. Yeah. It's that's a great way to look at it. It's because it's not just for depression. Psilocybin, even though it's been called at this point breakthrough therapy for depression, it's not just for depression. MDMA has been called breakthrough therapy by the FDA for PTSD. It's not just for PTSD. Ketamine hasn't been called breakthrough therapy for anything. It's quote unquote just an anesthetic, a humble little anesthetic from 1962 that people go, oh, it's made in the lab. It's not natural. I'm like, well, it is. It actually comes from a mushroom that puts out a substance that is ketamine that keeps it from being eaten by nematodes. So it's yeah, it's as natural as you want it to be, but it's a wonderful catalyst and facilitator of things that aren't just one lane. Yes, it can be wonderfully helpful with trauma, but it can destabilize things too. The nice thing about ketamine is if trauma, which has a tendency to destabilize in a lot of situations, like you said, especially if those, I like the metaphor of the funhouse, now all the walls are down. What's that movie? Is it Inside Out? Is that the movie where all the emotions are in the head together,
Yes.
talking to each other?
Yes.
Yeah. So you get more of a, they ain't hugging each other the whole time, but they're like, oh, they don't have to peer through the window at you. Okay, like, oh yeah, there's joy over there, but sadness there, they don't want to hang out. I'm like, no, they're just kind of hanging out. But what do you do with that? Because what comes up? People go, I didn't see anything. I was in the dark the whole time. I go, okay, let's talk about darkness then. What is it about darkness that seems troubling to you? Because it seems like you're having a little challenge with being in the dark. Well, I heard my friends got kaleidoscope colors and all sorts of roller coaster things. I'm like, okay. And what did you have the time before this? Oh, I had like colors and kaleidoscopes. I go, so yeah, that reinforces the, like you said, the preparation piece that every experience is likely to be remarkably different. Somatically, spiritually, physically, emotionally, all those things. So you not necessarily protecting emotional safety by preparing people for this, but you're hopefully giving some insight into what their emotions do when confronted with challenging factors.
And it translates into a life skill. I think that's what I really see is, those people that I've seen go through, ketamine, and then they come out on the other side. I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to divorce my partner. I'm going to make this big life change. And knowing that they just went through a situation where they had no idea what was going to happen. And maybe it was challenging. Maybe it was beautiful. Maybe it was all of it. And they have this, embodied visceral knowledge of like, I got this, I can handle this. And they can take that to a situation in their life. It's, in the yogic practice, right? We practice on the mat to take the skills off the mat. And I see the same thing with psychedelics. We practice in the ceremony, in the journey, in the experience. We practice what will help us make the changes that we need to make in our lives to align closer with what our desired state is.
Right. Yeah, setting goals can be helpful. Sometimes tangible goals are tough for folks too, so you can be vague about. You don't necessarily have to say, I want to improve my PHQ 9 and GAD scores by 20%. You can just say, I want to feel better. And you might want a little more context than that sometimes, but if that's kind of how someone is approaching some of this work, then if you say I want to feel better because you haven't felt very good in 20, 30, 40 years, then let's start with that. And we can operate under the umbrella of tangible results when we need to. But for now, if you just want to feel better, let's start with that and see what we can do to ease that into a better little notch, if you will, better track.
Absolutely. And that's what I really believe is for me, personally and professionally, one of the miracles of the medicine is that it can help us feel something that we maybe haven't felt before. And then it's not, right? The integration is not, oh, I need to go back to the medicine to feel that joy, feel that, contentment, feel that pleasantness. It's, okay, I know that's possible. Well, how do I get there without having to sit in ceremony all the time? How do I get there in my everyday life? What can I do to put my life on the track where I can feel more of that? Because now I know it's possible. I felt it. I know it. It's real. Let me get myself back there through my own ways, through my own integration process.
Right. Yeah. It's one of the therapist friends that I mentioned earlier. He goes, I'm still integrating a ketamine experience I had 7 years ago. So he goes, I haven't felt any need to revisit the medicine because I'm still working through the stuff I learned 7 years ago. So it was, it is lifelong stuff. It is, these medicines metaphorically will open the door and allow you to see whatever that the other side of the door is. And a lot of times that's some goals. I want to feel better, or I want to yell at the dishwasher less, or whatever it is that, I want to get out of bed this week because I didn't last week, whatever it is that really gets folks. It can be vague, it can be pinpoint, but you're creating this. So if you're making new pathways physically with this medicine, because it does offer a lot of neuroplasticity, and you're integrating within that, like you said, magical window, if you will, of a couple of days after your ketamine experience. Then those things become, Anna is the same person, but your pathways and behaviors are different now. Your essence hasn't changed, but the way you respond to situations is just not that. It's you're not responding. You're considering and you're acting if need be. Sometimes you just consider and that's all you do. Sometimes you just kind of walk away. So that pause it's sacred. That little pause. That pause can be 5 minutes. That pause can be 3 good conscious breaths before you walk out onto a speaking stage. That could be just one little eye close and vagus nerve stimulation kind of thing before you have to walk into an emergency room and sew somebody's arm up because they just cut themselves on a glass or something like that. But you're like, do that, or you're bringing whatever it is that you're trailing behind you with you. And then you're bringing that energy into the room, and that's going to challenge the people who you're caring for. So I think it's important to, for me, it's grounding. For me, and the word, slow down is there for sure, but the word that keeps coming back for me, that's the embodiment of this whole experience, is clarity. I got a lot, and with grounding comes more clarity, and with yogic practice comes more clarity, and those sort of things. But the slowing down part has continued to become more clear as I continue to integrate all the things that I've learned. And it's just, and integration is interesting because it'll sneak up on you. You're like, oh, I wasn't expecting to integrate that particular concept on a drive to Wyoming or something. It just came up. So we can continue to run away from those things when they come up, or like one of my favorite songwriters says, he goes, I've tried to be grateful for my devils and call them by their name. And that's hard.
I mean, no bad parts, right? Call them by their name. Like, oh, welcome back, John.
Hey, right, yeah. Hey, Southern Comfort, good to see you again, or whatever. This particular songwriter was talking about alcoholism in particular, but it was be grateful for your devils, because you're going to learn from them, or you should hope to learn from them.
Absolutely. I had something, I think it was last year, or I don't remember when it was. It was fairly recently, where I was in a situation and this thought popped into my head that was so old. I mean, really just like a really old coping mechanism. And I just remember, turning my head in a different direction going, huh, you're back. I haven't heard from you in years. How have you been?
Right.
Like, you're still here. I thought you went away. Oh my goodness.
That's great. Yep.
Yeah. But it's because of slowing down.
For sure, yeah. And slowing down allows for allowing, and allowing allows you to receive. And all of those things, you're like, okay, well, the effort in receiving and allowing is a lot less strenuous. Not that strenuous effort isn't good for some things, but if our efforts are strenuous for everything, including emotional regulation and, body dysmorphia and job status and buying cat food, and it just never stops. You're like, hold on a second. What's the big picture, little picture, either way? What picture are you looking at right now? You're looking at 20 of them. So what can you do to offer yourself less of another one of my teachers talks about the seat of awareness. It's amazing how much, if you take your seat of awareness and back it up just a little bit, then all of a sudden, holy perspective, Batman. And your life kind of unfolds from you at that point. But that can be a subconscious thing for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, with the pause, right? The 3 breaths or the pause or whatever it is. The other thing that I want to offer is that it can be done in hindsight, right? You lose control of a situation. And if you can have the humility, I think it's a very humble practice to say, oh, that didn't go the way, that wasn't my best performance, that I could do better. Let me go back and revisit, where could I in the next time pause? Because I love and accept that was the best that I could do. I love and accept that I could not slow down in that moment, but I know I have the power to create a pause, a breath, a space between impulse and response. And that's where all of my personal agency and power lives. Okay, I couldn't do it 20 minutes ago, but this situation is going to keep coming up and giving me the opportunity to refine it. So let me refine it by visualizing it in the past, projecting it towards the future. And visualization is incredible. Our mind has no idea what's real or imagined.
Right. And then you're already working through some of these stressful sort of responses that your body was otherwise going to incorporate with said situation before you even get to the said situation. So does that mean you're worrying before you get there? A little bit. But if you're approaching it from the intentional and tangible way that you just described, then you can kind of like, oh, yeah, that's not as big. And if you're breathing while you're doing that, one of my favorites is the in, out, the polyvagal sort of really turn your vagus nerve on. I really like that. The, what do they call that? It's not sympathetic side, the something side, primal side, like puppies do, or like babies do. They're like, like that. Breathe in twice and let it out. That's been my favorite. I like the box technique. That's a good one. But the in, out breath, I can teach that to a 5-year-old, and they understand that right now. And maybe they stop just running around the office, and they're like, yeah, cool. And then they sit there and they draw you pictures and you hang them on the wall. It's wonderful. So you can help 5-year-olds and 95-year-olds with a little pause like that. But like you said, maybe kind of carving out some of the, relatively expected sort of stress that's about to come in the situation that you're about to walk into at the DMV before you even walk into the DMV, because you've been there before, and you like kind of know how it's going to go. So I can prepare myself for that. And you may never be ready for it, but you can prepare yourself for it.
Same with psychedelics. You may never be ready for it, but you can prepare for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Those aren't my words. That comes from another teacher friend of mine, the Seed of Awareness teacher, Veronica. Yeah, she talks about being prepared and ready and how different that can be, which makes a lot of sense. Yeah, really, really powerful kind of stuff. She goes, like the death of a loved one, you'll never be ready for that. No matter how much you prepare, ever, you will never be ready for that. And other things.
Right.
So it's pretty cool perspective exercise, I think.
Oh. That feels like a summary of Scorpio season. You'll never be ready, but you can prepare.
Right. You can prepare all you want. But the readiness, you may even be partially ready, but never fully ready for fill in the blank.
Right. Yeah. I like to think, again, everyone has their own word for God, universe, source, spirit, energy, whatever it is. But, if God brings you to it, he'll bring you through it. So really trusting that if you're confronting something and you don't feel ready for it, you wouldn't be there if you weren't.
Yeah. Yeah, that kind of piggybacked off of my slow down sort of epiphany and some of the other things that I really kind of start putting pillars of things together that really kind of epitomize what I'm really working on. It's 3 things: patience, calm, and trust. And that trust is in everything, not just everyone else, but particularly trust in yourself. And not that I distrusted myself, but I've had some longer pauses in trusting myself, and maybe they were necessary at the time. In fact, they probably were. Either way, trusting in all of those things as I go forward, those 3 things have really kind of helped solidify a lot of my ketamine work. And like I said, the magic in between the sessions is really, like I said, I'm probably integrating something right now, and I won't realize it until later tonight. But it's absolutely, the integration part is just, it's ongoing, and it's wonderful.
Amen to that. All right, Jamie, we're gonna cut it off right there, because I think trust in self is everything. I think that is what really all of this work is guiding us towards, to that, the slow down and the personal agency, the personal power, so that I can trust myself to do what I need to do. I can trust myself to be my best friend, and I can trust myself to have the skills, or cultivate the skills, not even have them. None of us are taught this stuff, to cultivate the skills to really have the foresight and the reflection that keeps me coming back into a place of self-love.
Right. Yeah, it's and my gratitude to you and folks who are doing the work that we are all trying to do. I tell my friends a lot, if I could work myself out of a job, I'd be totally grateful for that too. But until that day comes, I will take. Well, in closing, and I never tell patients this to brag, but I offer it to some of them to give them some perspective. I say, my ACEs score is 0.
Wow.
And I They go, "Are you sure?" Like after we've taken the test. I mean, I don't just throw it on people. After we've taken the survey, I tell them, "Yeah, mine's 0." And I go, "No, I've looked at it 3 times. I can't find any numbers in there." I said, and so I cannot empathize with what you've been through. I can offer you as much sympathy and hold as much space with 0 judgment and never any pity, but I cannot empathize with what you've gone through because I have not experienced that. Never experienced any of it. So part of me goes, okay, I'm here. Part of what this calling is for this type of work is to, well, not give back, but to try to offer some space for those who've never had space to, well, trust themselves, if you will.
Right.
For whatever reason.
And for those that don't know, ACE is the Adverse Childhood Experience Score, and what it does is that it rates our childhood experiences from it's working to be as objective as possible. It's coming from an older theory of trauma being something that happens to us. We do know that, if you grow up in a single parent household with, low access to resources, maybe people with addiction or incarceration, we do know that that impacts us. And we also know a lot more about trauma now, that it's what happens inside the person, not what happens to the person. But there is a lot of validity to the ACE score nonetheless. It's us doing our best until we can do better.
Yeah. It's surveys are surveys, but this is a particularly poignant one that really kind of informs a lot on what childhood trauma, physically, emotionally, spiritually, nutritionally, all of those things, how that can inform a lot of things going forward. Now, you can have an ACE score of 0 and still have trauma and still have a hard time for sure, but it's coming from other places. So in the spirit of community, in the entire world that we understand, in the spirit of community, to me, that's one of the biggest things. Healing in community, being there for community, defining your community is great, but being, it's okay it's okay not to be grumpy, and you can smile at other people and realize that too.
I do believe that all of this work is to bring us back, right? Ram Dass, we're all just walking each other home.
Love that
right?
One.
It's just bringing us back to community.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it really is, because it might mean something different to others, but it's meant a similar thing for hundreds of thousands of years, and it means similar things to species before humans that have been around for billions. So it's community is very important. Here's to continuing to build it, my friend.
Amen. Yeah, there's a reason it's in the bottom part of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Belonging is crucial. It's as crucial as food, water, shelter. So it's there for a reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. So we're here to allow for others to receive that belonging.
Absolutely. We're all just walking each other home. Well, Jamie, thank you for being here and building this podcast with me and being a part of this community. And I appreciate you and your wisdom and your sharing and your generosity so much here today.
Well, it has been my absolute honor and privilege to spend this time with you. I look forward to doing this again. Onward and forward, my friends, because like you said, we all are walking each other home. But it's not just at the end of the day. You do that all day long.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Ketamine Connections. I hope you found our discussion insightful and empowering. Remember that understanding the subconscious mind and how to make the most of ketamine therapy can truly transform someone's healing journey. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to share it with your friends and family and anyone who might benefit from this information. So few people considering ketamine therapy are fully educated about its potential and the impact that it has on the subconscious mind. Your share could be the key element to their transformation. Don't forget to subscribe to Ketamine Connections so that you never miss an episode. And if you have a moment, I absolutely adore reading your reviews. So your feedback really helps me feel like this is an engaging exercise. Otherwise, I just feel like I'm talking into empty internet space. So your review really helps light me up and also helps me reach more audience. So I would appreciate one if you're willing. And please use the link below to submit any questions or topics that you would like covered. I cannot wait to hear from you and to co-create this journey together. Until next time, keep exploring, stay curious, and embrace the possibilities that are available in this moment right here, right now. Thanks so much. See you next time on Ketamine Connections.